The sky above Jasper National Park was pale gray, the kind of color that carries with it both silence and dread. A cold wind drifted across the northern landfill, rattling plastic bags and clanging tin cans against rusted barrels. David Marshall, a middle-aged garbage truck driver, thought it would be just another routine morning, but what he witnessed that day would break his heart and change his life forever. As David pulled his old garbage truck to a stop and opened the rear wiper, a strange sound pierced the empty lot. At first it was faint, almost easy to ignore, like the weak growl of an injured animal. He froze, his breath clouding in the air, scanning the heaps of plastic and trash. His first thought was of stray dogs. But then, through the piles of discarded waste, he saw a small creature moving, trembling, desperate. It was not a dog, it was a bear cub. Its fur was matted and filthy, tangled with mud. Its body was thin, bones pressing under the skin. Dark scratches covered its sides, and its movements were weak, almost broken. The tiny bear clawed at a torn plastic bag, biting at it, licking it as if starving. The plastic crinkled under its small teeth, a hollow and horrifying sound. Its eyes, dark and wet, held a despair that David had never seen in any living creature. For a moment his legs went cold. His chest tightened, and then a thought stabbed through him. Where was the mother? His instincts screamed that she could be nearby, hidden, watching. David stepped back quickly, his boots crunching the gravel, scanning the tree line. Silence. Nothing moved. Only the bear cub, alone, helpless, trying to eat garbage to survive. His fear turned to sorrow. He gripped his phone with trembling hands, dialed the Jasper Ranger Station, and forced his voice to stay steady. I found an abandoned bear cub. It's weak, eating trash. It looks like it's dying." The dispatcher's tone was calm but urgent. "Stay in your vehicle. Keep your distance. A rescue team will be there in 30 minutes. 30 minutes. David's heart sank. That was a lifetime for a starving cub. He leaned against his truck, eyes locked on the tiny body. Every second felt heavy. The cub looked at him once, only once. Its gaze was not wild. It was not threatening. It was the gaze of a child who had lost its mother, begging for one more chance. David swallowed hard, gripping the brim of his old work hat. Then the cub lowered its head into the cold, wet plastic and stopped moving. When the rumble of an approaching vehicle broke the silence, David almost cried in relief. A green rescue truck pulled up, two figures in thick ranger uniforms stepping out. Veteran Ranger Aiden Brooks raised his binoculars, his face grim. His younger colleague, Noah Chen, tightened his gloves, preparing equipment. "It must have been wandering for days," Aiden muttered. "It won't last much longer." David waved frantically, pointing to the motionless cub. "Over there! Please hurry! It's not moving!" Noah crouched carefully, keeping distance, gauging the cub's weakness. "It's too far gone," he whispered. But Aiden shook his head, pulling out the anesthetic gun. "We'll give it a chance. Agitation might kill it. We have to sedate it gently." The hiss of the dart flying struck silence into the air. The cub twitched once, then collapsed fully, its breathing shallow as mist. Noah rushed forward, laying a soft net over its body. Then he and Aiden carefully lifted it onto a folding stretcher. The cub's head rolled limply, a shadow of life flickering in each fragile breath. David stepped closer, instinctively helping to close the back of the rescue vehicle. His eyes followed the little bear even as the truck roared to life. For a brief second, he felt like a father watching a child being taken away. As the Rangers drove toward the Jasper Wildlife Veterinary Center, the truck's radio buzzed. "Prepare isolation cage, emergency digestive treatment, suspected plastic ingestion." Inside the back, Noah kept his eyes on the monitor, whispering softly, "Hold on, kid, just hold on." David stood by the garbage dump, the silence pressing on him once more. His hat trembled in his hands. He felt as if a piece of the wilderness had just collapsed in front of him, and all he could do was hope that someone somewhere could stitch it back together. At the veterinary center, the cub arrived weighing barely 9 kilograms, half the weight of a healthy bear its age. Head veterinarian Dr. Emma Renault wasted no time. Along with 2 assistants, she moved it into the decontamination room, attaching IVs and running an ultrasound. The image made them gasp. The bear's stomach was full of foreign objects, crumpled nylon bags, sharp plastic pieces, even a fragment of aluminum. "This poor thing," Emma whispered. It tried to live on trash. There was nothing else. The team prepared an emergency endoscopy. For an hour and a half, they worked tirelessly, removing nearly 300 grams of waste from the cub's tiny stomach. The process was delicate, every second threatening collapse. But finally they succeeded. The foreign objects clattered into the disposal tray, grotesque trophies of human negligence. Emma pressed a hand to the cub's side, feeling the faint heartbeat. "Still here," she breathed, "still fighting." They injected antibiotics, cleaned the infected scratches, and applied soothing protein solutions to its fragile body. Little by little, warmth returned to its skin. Emma looked at the tiny form, still weak, still trembling, but alive. "We'll call her Maple," she said softly, "like the little leaf that survives the winter." For the first night, Maple barely moved, her eyes half closed, responding only to the soft touch of the caretakers. But she was no longer lying in the garbage. She was no longer starving on plastic. She was surrounded by hands that refused to give up. And so began the fight for a life that should have ended on a landfill floor. The first days were uncertain. Maple lay curled in her isolation cage, her breath shallow, her body trembling with exhaustion. The veterinary team at Jasper worked in silence, feeding her with syringes of warm porridge mixed with enzymes. Dr. Emma Renault checked her heart every few hours, whispering encouragement as if words could anchor her soul to life. On the third day, something changed. Emma entered the cage quietly, holding a small bowl of steamed meat and porridge. As she reached out, Maple's weak paw shifted. The cub lifted her head, unsteady, her dark eyes blinking against the light. For the first time, she ate on her own, slowly, carefully. But it was enough to send hope rushing through the room. "She's fighting," Emma whispered. "She wants to live." From that day on, Maple's recovery became a story written in small victories. She stood on wobbly legs. She took 2 steps, then collapsed, but the next day she walked 5. The fur on her shoulders, once raw with sores, began to grow back in uneven patches. By the end of the week, she could sit upright, stretching her neck toward the sound of voices. Her weight climbed from 9 kilograms to 11, and her heartbeat grew steadier, stronger. Noah Chen visited her every afternoon, always carrying fresh blueberries in his pocket. Kneeling by the cage, he would roll the berries across the floor, watching her paw at them before nudging them into her mouth. "Good girl," he'd whisper, smiling at her small growl. "One day you'll hunt for real." Ranger Aidan Brooks, a man of few words, wrote notes in his battered notebook. Reacts faster to sounds, less afraid of human presence. Every sign of progress was carefully logged. The world outside began to notice. The rescue station set up a live stream of Maple's recovery. People across Canada tuned in to watch the little bear, once found eating plastic, now wobble toward health. The stream went viral. Donations poured in. Schools held sessions on pollution and wildlife safety, with teachers playing Maple's story in classrooms. The landfill cub had become a symbol of survival. David Marshall, the garbage truck driver who had found her, appeared in a short interview. His voice shook as he spoke. I just did what anyone should do. I saw her there, eating trash like it was food. No one should die that way, not a bear, not anything." Viewers saw the man's eyes glisten with tears, his rough work hat clutched in his hands. They saw Maple's frail first image side by side with her new, stronger self. The contrast was devastating, unforgettable. By the 4th week, Maple's progress was undeniable. Her blood tests came back stable. Her digestion was clear. Muscles once weak as twigs had firmed. She climbed logs placed in her cage, scratching the bark as if to remind herself of instinct. She rolled in fresh hay, growled softly at loud noises, and began to act. Not like a patient, but like a bear. Emma stood with her team after the final checkup, relief glowing on her face. "She's ready," she said. "It's time." That spring morning, the Rangers loaded Maple gently into a transport cage. She pressed her nose against the bars, sniffing the unfamiliar scent of damp soil drifting through the air. The truck drove not to the hospital, but to a wide semi-wild enclosure on the edge of Jasper National Park. When the cage door opened, Maple hesitated. For a heartbeat, she stayed still. Then, slowly, she stepped out. Her paws touched green grass for the first time in weeks. She lifted her nose to the sky, inhaling the scent of pine and earth. The sound of birds filled her ears, and then she rolled into the soil, claws digging into the ground as if claiming her place. Visitors watched through safety glass, stunned. Some cried. Children pressed their hands to the barrier, whispering her name. They had seen her first image, skin and bones, eyes empty with despair, and now they saw a creature alive with strength. David stood among them, quiet. When he softly called her name, Maple, the little bear paused. Her ears twitched. She raised her head for just a second, as though remembering. The enclosure was built to mimic the wild, climbing plants, small ponds, rocky hiding places. Here Maple learned again what it meant to be a bear. She climbed higher each day. She swam in the pond, splashing like a child. At night she curled into a den of her own making, no longer in fear, no longer in garbage, but in safety. A wooden sign was erected at the entrance of her enclosure, Maple, the little bear who survived the dump. Beneath it, visitors could read her story and see the haunting first picture, a tiny cub with her head buried in plastic, fighting for scraps of life. The message was clear: pollution kills, compassion saves. The Jasper Rescue Force began holding educational talks, showing Maple's journey as proof of what happens when humans care. Not all animals are saved, Aiden admitted during one session, but this one was, and that means every life is worth fighting for. Months passed. Maple's fur grew thick and glossy. Her body grew strong, her eyes bright with instinct. She was no longer the trembling cub from the landfill. She was a young bear with power in her stride and life in her heart. Canadian television filmed a special feature, An Orphan Bear's Second Story. Millions watched Maple climb, swim, and rest in the shade. She had become more than just a rescue. She was a symbol of survival against all odds. And David, still driving his old garbage truck every morning, found himself glancing at the edges of the forest. Each time his eyes searched for miracles. Each time he remembered Maple's desperate stare, the one that had begged for help. He would never forget that day at the dump, the sound of plastic crinkling between small, starving teeth. But now, when he thought of Maple, he didn't see despair. He saw hope, curled up under the green pines of Alberta, alive because people had cared enough to act. The wilderness had given back a life, and Maple, the little bear who once whimpered in the garbage, was now the truest testament to faith, perseverance, and compassion.